In this video, we'll be exploring Sartre's understanding of existentialism. Existentialism is used to describe the work of many philosophers who see human existence as a philosophical problem. Its main representatives are Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Albert Camus, Karl Jaspers, Martin Heidegger, Martin Buber, Jean Wahl, Gabriel Marcel, José Ortega y Gasset, and Miguel de Unamuno. Although there are many differences in the approaches of these philosophers to existentialism, they all have in common that they directed the subject of philosophical inquiry not only to the thinking human being, but also to the human being acting in various ways. Jean-Paul Sartre was the first to use the term existentialism. With Sartre's work, existentialism became a very common philosophical doctrine in the 1940s and 1950s. So much so that existentialist approaches are seen not only in philosophy but also in literary works, such as novels, poetry and short stories. Sartre's life. He was born in Paris in 1905 and spent most of his life there. He went to Germany in the 1930s. In Germany, he met Husserl and Heidegger. He returned to France and became a teacher. He wrote Being and Nothingness, which is considered his masterpiece, in the early 1940s. He joined the army during World War II. He was imprisoned by the Germans. He later joined the famous resistance movement in France. During this time, he worked as a newspaper editor. In the literary political magazine Les Temps Modernes, he opposed the war waged by France against Algeria. He refused the Nobel Prize, which was to be awarded to him in 1964. Between 1966 and 1967, he joined Russell in the tribunal set up to investigate war crimes committed during the Vietnam War. Major philosophical works: The Imagination, 1936, Being and Nothingness, 1943, Existentialism is a Humanism, 1946, Critique of Dialectical Reason, 1960, The Transcendence of the Ego, 1960. In addition to these works, Sartre has written many novels. The most important of these are Nausea, The Wall, The Roads to Freedom, and The Age of Reason. Heidegger's Influence, a Review of Being and Time. Sartre's understanding of existentialism develops largely under the influence of Heidegger. Therefore, let us briefly touch on Heidegger before discussing existentialism. Heidegger dedicated Being and Time, his first work written in 1927, to Husserl. While agreeing with Husserl on the importance of doing phenomenology, phenomenology for him is also a metaphysics and ontology. What things really are can be known in relation to how they are experienced by the things that experience them. Heidegger calls human existence Dasein, being there. Dasein manifests itself by being in the world. The world is the place of Dasein. The world is what surrounds us and constitutes our experiences. The point to note here is that when Heidegger speaks of the world, he does not see it as a whole consisting only of physical things. The world is also a world of hopes, joys, sorrows, enthusiasms, destructions, etc. All these shape our experiences from moment to moment. According to Heidegger, objects acquire meaning in their relation to Dasein. In this respect, it is a metaphysical error to evaluate objects solely on the basis of their qualities. For example, when we speak of a hammer, the metaphysical significance of a hammer is how it fits into the world of Dasein. It is a tool and has a specific use. In this context, the hammer is an extension of us. It is something at hand, Zuhandenheit. Sartre's understanding of existentialism, the distinction between being in itself and being for itself. Sartre, like Husserl and Heidegger, sees consciousness as the fundamental concept of philosophy. In addition, he states that he is doing phenomenology. For Sartre, phenomenology is an investigation to reach the basic structures of experience. In traditional metaphysics, poverty prevails because the world around us excludes certain experiences. Sartre, who wants to overcome this poverty, focuses on various human situations in the footsteps of Heidegger. Man is a being with feelings, values and preferences. Every truth and every action involves a human arrangement. There are two kinds of things in Sartre's metaphysics. The distinction between these things is made through temporality. Sartre then makes a distinction between being in itself, être en soi, and being for itself, être pour soi. From the point of view of being in itself, essence precedes existence. Let's explain this situation with Sartre's example. Let's think of a paper cutter. This object is something designed as it is. Someone wanted to cut paper and, realizing this desire, designed a tool suitable for this function. So the essence of the paper cutter emerged when it did not yet exist, and then came into existence itself. In this respect, when the paper cutter exists, it is what it should be. Its existence is complete. So the essence of being in itself is arranged in the past. According to Sartre, many philosophers like Descartes see man as a being in itself because they define man as a being whose essence is created by God. In this case, when it comes to human existence, we are what we are. The natural consequence of this understanding is that we all represent universal human nature. Whoever we are, wherever we are born and live, who we are is already determined. Sartre proposes the concept of being for itself instead of being in itself. According to this kind of understanding of being, existence precedes essence. In the case of being for itself, the human mind finds itself in a state of being. This situation is the product of one's own choices. The mind is a consciousness, but this consciousness is a nothingness. Nothingness is a void/room/space that allows other things to enter. Consciousness is not something in itself, it is always consciousness of something. For example, it is the consciousness of a phenomenon, or of an emotion, or of a particular object, etc. By the choices we make in terms of how we direct our consciousness, we determine the nature of our consciousness and thus the nature of reality. The state of being for itself is a certain way of being in time. It is an essence organized by the future we determine with our own hands. Sartre points out that man has the freedom to choose what he will be. However, the becoming here is not about momentary choices, but about the totality of choices. In this sense, everyone draws their own path of existence with their own choices. At this point, Sartre calls us to question ourselves. How much are we ourselves? In other words, to what extent have we determined ourselves by our goals? Why are we experiencing a certain situation? Did we ask for this situation? As can be seen, Sartre seeks the answer to who a person is, what their essence is, in their choices. In this respect, according to Sartre, everyone should live according to their own choices. A person who does not live his own choices cannot live himself. This goal of living oneself is the most fundamental goal. Human responsibility and anguish in Sartre's understanding of existentialism. For Sartre, man is nothing but what he makes of himself. In this respect, the difference between a human being and other beings, such as a table or a stone, is that the human being first exists. That is, he is a being thrown towards a future and aware of this. Man is responsible for what he is. Therefore, the first task of existentialism is to make man aware of what he is and to burden him with the entire responsibility of his existence. Man's responsibility for himself means that he bears not only his own individual responsibility, but also the responsibility of all men. In existentialism, it is argued that when man chooses himself, he also chooses all men. Each of our actions aimed at creating the person we want to be is also a step taken in creating an image of man that we consider necessary. Existentialists argue that man has anguish. This means that when a man commits himself to something, he is aware that he is not only choosing what he will be, but that he is also a legislator choosing for all mankind. According to existentialists, many people believe that their actions only bind themselves. When asked, "What if everyone did that?" they shrug their shoulders and reply, "But everyone doesn't do that." But in reality, man must always ask himself, "What if everyone did that?" He who lies by claiming that not everyone behaves like that and justifies himself is not at ease, for lying itself means giving a universal value to lying. Anguish appears even when it hides itself. In existentialism is a humanism, Sartre says on this subject. In every act, it is as if all mankind were watching him and adjusting itself to what he does. For him, everyone should ask themselves this question: are my actions worthy of mankind adjusting itself to me? Those who do not ask this are hiding their anguish from themselves. What we are talking about here is not an anguish that leads man to resignation or inaction, but a simple anguish that everyone who has had responsibilities knows.